Hello, today in the lesson we will solve another problem on the ratio of magnitudes. The condition of the problem: travelers have been traveling for 3 days. The ratio of the distance they traveled in 3 days is equal to the first day is equal to the second day and the third day. Just as 6 relates to 5.6 tenths and relates to 4.4 tenths. The travelers traveled for 3 days, and each day they traveled a different distance. The first day they traveled 6 parts of the way, the second day 5.6 tenths, and on the third day 4.4 tenths. We need to find what is the distance the travelers traveled in 3 days. But we have another condition. On the first day, they traveled 64 kilometers more than they did on the third day. They traveled more kilometers on the first day, more than they traveled on the third day, by 64 kilometers. We need to find the distance that the travelers traveled in three days. You and I have been paying attention to the fact that we are working with parts, and therefore we need to find what one part is equal to. But in this case, we're told that on the first day they traveled more than on the third day by 64 kilometers. And in order to find out what one part of a kilometer is, we have to subtract from 6. Take away 4.4, and then 6 minus 4.4 is 1.6. .6 tenths is the difference between the parts they traveled on the first day and the third day. If the difference between the distance on the first day and the third day is 1.6 tenths, and 1.6 tenths is 64 kilometers, I can find what one part equals. To do this, we need to divide 64 kilometers by 1.6 tenths. And then we can find out what one part equals. 64 divided by 1.6, we can do that by, we write down 640 divided by 16. In this case, I moved our decimal point 1 decimal place to the right. And then, in the number 64, I've added 1 0. 640 divided by 16 equals 40 kilometers in one part. But if 40 kilometers is one part, we can find how many kilometers they traveled on the first day. They traveled 6 parts on the first day. 6 times 40 is 240. Let's write down on the first day. They traveled 6 times 40 equals 240 kilometers. Using the same algorithm, we will find how many kilometers they traveled on the second day. On the second day, they traveled 5.6. We multiply that by 40, and we get 224 kilometers. Using the same algorithm, we find how many kilometers they drove on day 3. To do this, we multiply 4.4 tenths by 40 kilometers. The result is 176 kilometers. In order to find out how much distance they traveled in 3 days, we need to add the distance they traveled on the first day, add the distance they traveled on the second day and the third day. Add up the distance on the first day, which is 240 kilometers, plus the distance. The 224 kilometers on the second day and the distance they traveled on the third day. As a result, they traveled 640 kilometers in 3 days. In the next lesson, we will solve another problem on the ratio of values. And today our lesson has come to an end. Goodbye. See you again.